down in the front row. Burn bright. You're blinded now, can't see the fight. Smoke and mirrors, they lead the way. Fooling hearts night after day. Welcome to the show, it's all pretend. The smiles, the lies, the perfect end. The world's a stage, they run the floor. You clap on cue down in the front row. Painted faces, massive stone.
All right, welcome guys and gals. So let's imagine this. A movement sells itself as pure liberation for women, the right to vote, to own property, to escape bad marriages. But what if the real winners weren't the women? What if the real winners were, let's say, the government? And suddenly every household has 2 taxable paychecks instead of 1. And what if the price tag was handing your kids over to public schools from 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. as the new taxpayer-funded sitter service? Interesting. Well, today on Breaking the System, we're asking the uncomfortable what if. Was feminism, especially its second wave, and that's the one we're going to be focusing on today, the greatest fiscal hack of the 20th century? And not a grand conspiracy with secret meetings, but a perfect alignment of incentives. More workers in the tax base, more reliance on state institutions, and weaker family units that need government more. We're going deep into the history because time doesn't matter when the incentives still shape your life today. So stick around. This one might make you rethink everything. So welcome to Breaking the System. Episode 46, Feminism's Hidden Tax, Double the Workers, Double the Revenue. So let's rewind the timeline. Let's go back to some roots. The first wave of feminism from 1848 to 1920s. Seneca Falls Convention, we got Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Susan B. Anthony, and the Declaration of the Sentiments. And the fight was crystal clear. Legal equality. And so during this time, women couldn't own property in their own name. They couldn't sign contracts. They couldn't get custody of their own kids in divorce. And they definitely could not vote. And so the goal was not, let's shove every married mother into the factory. It was basic rights inside the existing single breadwinner model that dominated most of human history. And so if we fast forward to the mid-1800s, public education is already becoming compulsory. Massachusetts passes the first law in 1852 requiring kids 8 to 14 to attend school. Why? Well, not because feminists demanded daycare. The stated goal was to civilize poor immigrants, to teach obedience, restraint, and turn them into what? Into good factory workers, so they wouldn't cause social upheaval. And by 1918, every single U.S. state had compulsory attendance laws. Horace Mann and the Common School reformers weren't feminists. They were Protestant moralists and nation builders who wanted literate, compliant citizens. Public school was built as the built-in sitter. That infrastructure was already there decades before Betty Friedan ever typed a word. Now the 1960s hit, and the second wave of feminism explodes. Betty Friedman's The Feminine Mystique calls the suburban housewife role a comfortable concentration camp. Radical voices go further. Linda Gordon in 1969 writes that the nuclear family must be destroyed because families support oppression by isolating people. Okay? So the nuclear family was in direct attack. Stop it. I got my dog here with me tonight. Solomon Firestone calls childbearing the heart of women's oppression, and Simone de Beauvoir flat out says no woman should be allowed to stay home and raise her children because too many would choose it. Yeah. Too many women would choose to stay home and to raise their kids. Like, why not? Right? I mean, possibly you could have been forced to do this, but most women chose this because that was their role. That was the tradition, okay? And so the message from the radical edge, the traditional family is the enemy. Collective child care, state-supported daycare, and to break the nuclear unit. And so let's stop for a second. Let's internalize this, and let's take a deep look. Are all of those things, or are any of those things better than what we had? And by that, I mean, is collective child care better than the mother staying home and taking care of the kid? Is state-supported daycare, in this case we're talking about public school, is public school, was it better than children staying home and learning from their parents, learning how to cook and to clean and to sew and to respect one another and to take care of things? And is it better to have broken households, or is it better to have a nuclear unit? So take a second, think about those questions. And so are any of those things better than what we had before? Okay? And I'm going to leave that up to you. I'm not going to put my 2 cents in. So while you're thinking about that, let's keep going. So meanwhile, the economy is shifting. Birth control pill arrives in 1960. Real wages for men start stagnating in the 1970s. Housing and college costs begin their insane climb. Female labor force participation which had begun around 30 to 35% for decades, drastically shoots up during this time period. And by the late 1990s, it peaks near 60%. 2 incomes become the new normal. Now, here's where the what if, right, gets spicy. Let's throw in some data, some statistics here. Every extra woman in the formal workforce means another paycheck the IRS can tax. Progressive brackets plus dual income equals higher effective tax rates for millions of families. No more untaxed household labor, right? So we're talking about cooking, cleaning, childcare, elderly, that used to add real economic value without showing up on a W-2. Okay, so what that's, and we'll kind of get into that just a little bit more here in just a second. But the wife at that time, if households needed extra money, they could cook for extra money. They could clean other people's houses for extra money. They could take care of other people's kids for extra money. They could take care of elderly for extra money. And most of that at that time was off the books. So it was extra revenue that families could bring in that wasn't taxed. Okay. So all of that started to show up on a W-2, okay, after this time period. Public schools, already compulsory, now become the perfect free to the family daycare for two working parents. And let's get that straight. Like, public education is not free. It's sold as free, but like we pay for it through taxes, okay? So summers, holidays, and after-school gaps, more demand for government programs, more justification for bigger budgets. The nuclear family weakens. Divorce rates skyrocket after no-fault laws in the 1970s. Birth rates collapse basically overnight. And single-parent households, well, they do what? They start on the rise, often relying on state support. And so the state doesn't just get more tax revenue, it gets more dependence. So we got to follow the incentives, right? And so when we fast forward all of those ideas into modern society, into today, is having the state in your life more often. Is that better or is that worse? Is having more dependence on state programs is for the economy and for society, is that better or is that worse? Okay? And so like these are all critical questions that we have to start asking ourselves. Maybe we need to take a step back. Maybe we need to start asking politicians to start eliminating some of these things and taking a step back towards ideas of the household from the 1960s, right? And so like I'm just saying what if, okay? What if? Because is the household, is the family better today than what it was in the 1960s, okay? And I'm saying in a nutshell, right? Everything all wrapped up into one, okay? Because I realize that some people have it worse off and some people have it better off, but overall as society, are we better today working where the father works and where the mother works, and sometimes you have to have an extra job on the side or two extra jobs on the side, and you don't get to spend time with your kids and all of these other things? Is that type of lifestyle better than what we had in the 1960s, where the father would go to work and they could buy a house, they could buy a car, they could put their kids through college, they could save for retirement, all on the one income? And not only that, the mom could stay at home. They had more home-cooked meals. There was less eating out. There was more conversations around the dinner table. Okay? Families were more interconnected. Parents knew what was going on in kids' lives, and the kids knew how the parents were interacting as parents. So think about those things. And is today's family dynamic? Is it better than what it was in the 1960s, or have we taken a step back? And that is a real critical question that we have to ask ourselves. Okay? Let's move forward. Let's talk about evidence for the stillman. So let's stillman this idea with cold hard history and numbers. Okay? Elizabeth Warren, yes, Elizabeth Warren co-wrote the two-income trap of 2004 with her daughter Amelia. They crunched the data. A two-income family today earns 75 more on paper than a single-income family of a generation ago, but has 25% less discretionary income after fixed costs. Why is that? Well, they bid up the price of housing in good school districts, extracurriculars, and college. So all of that stuff is up 25% more. And so when we think of that, one layoff, one medical bill, and the whole house of cards collapses. It is. Most houses, most families are one layoff, one medical bill, one big thing, and the whole house collapses and they lose everything. Okay? Bankruptcy filings exploded even before the 2008 crash. In Warren's own conclusion, the stay-at-home mom of the past was the family's built-in safety net. And this is what I was talking about a while ago. So she was the safety net. She could step in and earn extra cash or care for sick relatives without the household losing its primary income. And now that safety net is gone, completely gone, okay? And tax data backs it up. The marriage penalty has existed since the income tax began in 1913. When two earners file jointly, they get pushed into higher brackets faster. And Congress tweaked it over the years. In the 2001 reform, the TCJI in 2017 widened the brackets. But the penalty still hits dual income middle class families the hardest. More revenue for the state, less left for the family. And so radical feminists' writings from the 1960s and 1970s openly celebrated this complete breakdown. Linda Gordon said, or wrote, "Families isolate people so they can't fight for common interest." The Declaration of Feminism in 1971, the end of the institution of marriage is a necessary condition for the liberation of women. Some pushed for communal child rearing so women could be economically independent, and conveniently, the state or collective takes over the traditional family role. How many of you would love the state to take over the role of the family? Like, we've talked about this before. I don't want the government in my house any more than what they already have to be. Okay? And so these people in the 1960s and the early 1970s, they celebrated the idea of women becoming economically independent, which in its right is a good thing, right? Women becoming economically independent, don't get me wrong, that is an amazing thing. But because of that, they're saying that the state can collectively come in and takes over the traditional role of the family. Is that a good thing? Is it? I don't know. Labor stats tell the story. Female participation climbs steadily from the 1960s onward, right along the second wave of activism. Governments everywhere, left or right, suddenly had a bigger taxable workforce. Oh, that's great, right? Like our politicians love more taxes. The GDP looks great. Tax receipts rise. And when both parents work full time, who's raising the kids during the day? Well, that's where the public school system steps in. That was built for exactly that purpose decades earlier. So that system, the public school system, is already set up and it's already ready for this. Okay? It's almost like it was preordained, right? It's almost like that system was specifically set up so that when feminism, the second wave of feminism hit, it's already ready. The building blocks are already there. And so those incentives, they aligned perfectly. Okay? But let's be honest. We're not saying Gloria Steinman sat in a room with the IRS agents plotting this. History is messy. It is. History is extremely messy. And so the first wave of feminism was about real legal oppression. Women legally couldn't own the wages they earned in some states, right? If they made money, they actually had to give it over to the husband, and the husband could do whatever they wanted to with it. Okay, so that fight was legitimate, hands down, legitimate. Most early feminists weren't anti-family, they wanted better families. Bigger forces were at work. Industrialization and urbanization shattered extended family networks long before feminism. And World War II pulled millions of women into factories, and many never left. The service economy needed more workers. Stagnant male wages plus rising costs of things like housing and healthcare and education made the single earner model feel impossible for millions. So because of what was starting to happen during the 1970s on up into the early 80s, right? We have rising costs in housing, rising healthcare costs, rising costs in education. So basically living was becoming more expensive because politicians seen that they could tax more when more people are working. So it kept more people working. Okay? And the pill gave women real choice about when or if to have kids. Feminism didn't create those economic pressures. It rode them and accelerated the cultural shift. Right? It's like a domino effect. You push the first domino down, and 100 dominoes later, it's still falling. Okay? Public school predate modern feminism by 100 plus years. The 1852 Massachusetts law, the 1918 nationwide compulsory attendance, those were about assimilation and workforce training, not feminist daycare plots. Okay? And today, well, plenty of feminists complain about the exact same trap. Corporate girl boss feminism celebrates the career woman while ignoring that most families are exhausted and financially brittle. Many modern feminists push for paid leave or paid family leave and subsidized daycare precisely because the two-income grind is brutal. Outcomes are mixed. Women have more autonomy, higher earnings, legal equality. But we also have fertility collapse, right? And we're talking about the fertility collapse in developed countries. This is not just a problem that the United States has. Most, and I'm not saying all, most developed countries, because of things like the pill and because of other things that's happening, right? Men are focused on their career, women are focused on their career, that a lot of people are pushing the idea of family to the side. And it comes way later on. So instead of people thinking about building a family in their late 20s, mid 20s, early 20s, even at like 18, 19, most people are waiting till 30, 35, in their early 40s to even think about having a family, okay? And so that leaves less time to have more kids, okay? And once again, I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but when we look at fertility as a developed nation, it's collapsing. We need a 2.1 or a 2.2 to become stable to where we're just exponent, just to where we're growing on the hairline. And anything less than that is a collapse within the society, okay? And so we also look at boys falling behind in feminized schools because, right, we talked about this in one of our last podcasts, that most teachers are women. So it becomes more feminine. Schools become more feminized because of that. And boys have a hard time fitting in and they fall behind. Skyrocketing mental health issues with kids is also on the incline. And parents who barely see their own children. That's a huge issue, right? There's no time for family bonding like there used to be, okay? And so correlation is not always causation, but the incentives, well, they are real. So who actually benefited? Well, governments got a bigger tax base and more justification for expansive programs. Corporations got a doubled labor pool that helped suppress wage growth in some sectors, not all, but in some sectors. And many women gained real opportunities that they never had before. But families, right? Think about the family dynamic. The data from Warren's book suggests a lot of middle-class households traded security for a higher nominal income and ended up more fragile. And the cultural shift away from the nuclear family, cheered by some radical feminists, created space for the state to step in as the new provider. More single moms on assistance. More kids in government-ran schools starting from age 5. More adults too tired or too disconnected to push back on literally anything, right? When was the last time you went to a school board meeting? It's probably been a while. When was the last time you went to a county board meeting? It's probably been a while. So, as people in society, parents, they're not engaged in the school's education system. They're not checking on what's being taught. Okay? They're not keeping the school board accountable, right? Look at what's being taught. And the second part, we're not holding our city officials to do the job, right? Nobody shows up to a board meeting. They can pass whatever they want to pass, whatever law they want to pass, okay? So there's a lot of other things that are in play here because of this, okay? So alternatives exist. The tax policy that doesn't push single earner families, school choice so parents aren't forced into a one-size-fits-all public daycare, cultural norms that value homemaking as real work instead of what they call unproductive, paid leave that actually lets a parent stay home without career death, okay? And for that one, I really think that we need to push not only a mother paid leave, but also a father's paid leave so that the mother and father can start raising the child, for however long, right? At least a few weeks, okay? That would be real nice. And so the point isn't to push women back into the kitchen, right? That's not the whole point. The point is real choice. One earner, two earners, hybrid, without the economic vice squeezing families into the state's preferred model, right? And once again, think about it. If it was up to the state, they would have us being taxed to literal death, and we would be put into every state program so that the state, could keep track of everything that we do, right? It's that idea of the like the 5-minute city, or the idea of, the World Economic Forum, where you would have a carbon footprint, and you would have to check in, and you have to do this and you have to do that, and it's all state ran and it's all federally backed, and the government is in every aspect of your life, right? That's what they want. Okay, it's not what I want. Is that what you want? We have to think about these things. So we started with a provocative what if, and we ended with history, data, and incentives that are still shaping your paycheck and your family's future right now. Feminism delivered real rights, but the second wave's push against the nuclear family aligned perfectly with a state that loves double tax revenue, and they love built-in child care. Unintended consequences, or just a quiet feature, right? And that's something that we have to decide, as not only as a culture and as a society, but individually, right? Were these unintended consequences, or was this just a quiet feature that was built in along the way, built into these systems that are systematically built on top of each other? And so here's your critical thinking question to chew on for the week, right? Because we always like to end off with a critical question. If the incentives were flipped, and I really like this one, tax policies that reward that once rewarded single earner households, schools that actually served parents instead of the other way around, and a culture that celebrated raising your own kids as high status work, would most families choose the 2-income grind? Or would they go back to one strong household income with real time together? Okay, so drop those comments, right? So whether if we're on, because we're on Facebook now, but this gets uploaded to YouTube and to Spotify and to Amazon and to a couple other places. Post comments, right? What do you think? Do you think most people enjoy what we currently have, the 2-family income? Or do you think that most families, most people would choose a single household breadwinner, and even the father, so the mother or the father, one of them would stay home and would cook and would clean and maybe even homeschool the kids more often? Maybe they would go to public education later on in life, right? How do you think that would work? Do you think that would be better for society or worse for society? So drop those comments for me and leave those DMs, because I love reading what people leave for us. Okay? So thanks for listening to Breaking the System. If this episode made you think different about the daily grind, smash that subscribe, please. Leave a review. I try to check everyone. And share it. Share it with one person that you agree with. Share it with one person that you politically disagree with. Right? Share it with a person who still believes that the system is working for families, because I don't think it is. Okay? And so next week we're tackling another hidden incentive that's right in plain sight. So until then, let's break the system before it breaks you. Keep critically thinking. Okay, stay curious, stay skeptical. God bless you, and we'll see you guys next time. Have a good night.